Hey class, welcome to the first lesson for computational practice for the fall 2020 semester. So today we'll be going over the basics, right? So what templates are, how to move around Revit, the different components, and then we'll start to build just a really simple contemporary house and start to explore some of the more basic Revit elements and geometries that you can start to model. So I have opened Revit 2020. If you have 2018 or 2019, that's okay as well. There may be some differences between 18, 19, and 20. There's not many, but there may be some. So if you run into something that I do on here, or there's a button that isn't on yours, just come and ask me. And if it's something that got changed or updated in the newer versions, we'll just figure it out from there. But all the components should all be relatively in the same place. So this is Revit 2020. Revit 18 and 19 may look a little bit different, but they're relatively the same components and layout. So you have your recently opened models, recently opened families, and then on the left you'll have opening old or previous models, creating new models, new families, opening pre-existing families. So today, before we open this, I want to go over templates. So Revit templates are basically your starting point for a project, and you can change that. And what templates consist of is potentially preloaded families or elements or different graphic styles, stuff like that. Typically, when you open like a typical architectural downloaded directly from Autodesk's website, they'll have a bunch of preloaded stuff in there. If you go work for a firm, they may have a specialized template. I know Little does, that have like preloaded walls, preloaded floors, stuff that typical details, code requirements, and a lot of boring stuff typically. But for our class, I've set up a preloaded Revit template that you can download from the Canvas website. So if you go to Files on Canvas and then you download the Computational Practice Revit template, then download that, save it to a place that you know and that you can access quickly. And then when you go and hit New in the Revit opening page, sorry, it was on another window. That's where you can select it. So right now I have these architectural, structural, mechanical. These are all the little templates. If I want to open up that other template, that we're going to be using for every project. So make sure if we start a new thing, you open our template. So you just go to Browse. It'll bring up a typical window, and then you just go and find it wherever you saved it. Okay, just hit open. Should populate here, and then you just hit OK, and it'll open up a new project with the template that I've set up. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Once again, if you have any questions, specifically for, this is the in-class tutorial, so I will be on the Zoom call whenever you need to ask me something. Just pop on, ask me. For any assignments that are outside of class, feel free to email me, and I'm pretty responsive with that, so in case you guys need any help. So when you open the file, it'll open to this north elevation. So I'll just go through the project, the browser window here. So starting from left to right, so this is the project browser. This is where you access all of the different views, drawings, schedules, legends, families, everything, all in here. And all you gotta do is hit that plus box. It'll explode what's below. So right now, all we have in this project are floor plans and elevations, but if we create sections, if we create 2D views, axons, anything like that, it's going to populate under views. Now, if we create sheets or drawings where you lay out different views, they'll go here. Schedules are just like Excel spreadsheets, basically. We'll get a little bit into that. And then all of the families that are loaded into the model or into the project right now are located here, and groups, etc. So that's the project browser. On the other side is your properties. And your properties will change based on what window you're in or what element you have selected. So right now, we're in an elevation, and I don't have anything selected. So what the properties are showing are the properties of the elevation itself. So the scale that it's in, the different visibility graphics and aesthetic properties of the elevation, whether or not I want to crop it, and then view templates are essentially all of the aesthetic graphic properties, but you can put them in a view template to then propagate throughout different drawings, a bunch of different drawings. We'll get into that. I know this is a lot, but I just want to cover the basics. So this is the elevation properties because we have nothing selected, but we're in an elevation view. Now, if I click an element, like let's say the roof level, you click that, then the properties change to the element that you've selected. So right now I have a level selected, so it brings up all the properties that are associated with a level. So the elevation that it's at, different dimensions that it may or may not have, whatever its identity, which you can change. And then the other thing with elemental properties or elements, properties of elements, so whether that be a wall, a roof, a level, like we have here, there are instance properties, which are what propagate here. They are for each individual element's properties. So if let's say I have two walls, right? One I want to be 20 feet high, the other one I want to be 8 feet high. Those are two instant properties that'll change. And I'll get into this more, but I just want to cover the basics. So instance properties are located here. Type properties are if you click into the edit type button, that brings up all of the type parameters. So, if I have a wall and that wall is brick, and then that's a type property, and I can change that. So let's say I have those two walls, one's 20 feet tall, the other is 10 feet tall, but they're both a brick property or a brick wall. They're both a brick type, and that's where you'll change the properties and parameters in here is the type parameters. Again, we'll get into it. You'll get much more comfortable with it. I know it's a lot. Revit's a very complex program. I'm just walking through some of the basics with you guys to make sure that you get a full range of what's here. So type parameters, instance parameters. Okay, and when we start actually modeling, it'll make a little bit more sense onto how those are distinguished. So that's the project browser and the properties. At the top, we have the Revit Ribbon, and they have a lot. So there's the different tabs. So architecture, structure, steel, systems, insert into, blah, 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 blah. I'll go through them one at a time. So architecture is where you find primarily all of your architectural model elements, and a lot of different like levels, your grids, different stuff like that. And they're broken up into different groups. So build group, circulation model, room area, etc. Most of what we'll be doing today will be located in the build group under the architecture tab, so your walls, doors, floors, etc. Structure, we're not going to do too much here. We may get into some like real simple columns and beams later on in the course, but this is typically reserved for structural engineers that are using Revit. Same thing with steel and systems. Same thing. We won't be doing anything with systems, but this is for the mechanical, the plumbing, the electrical engineers. Insert. So insert is where you can either insert a Rhino model or an AutoCAD file. You can link other Revit models into your project. So say we have, let's say for the high-rise project that Little is working on, we have an office model, we have a site model, we have a parking deck model, we have a hotel model, and then we have a context model. Okay, so if I'm working in the office model, I will have linked in all of the other models into it. The reason you do that is you keep your file size significantly lower if you're not working on multiple fully detailed projects, right? So you want to break those up into their individual buildings so that it keeps the file size low, but yet you can link them in so that you can still see the different relationships that they have between the two. So that's the linking. You can also link CAD files. So let's say a civil engineer, he's doing a drawing of the master plan or the site plan, and he's constantly updating it. You can take that CAD plan, link it into your file, and then you can update it every once in a while to reflect the changes that the civil engineer is making. That's how we primarily use it. You can link topography, all the different things. Manage links is where you can actually bring up all the links that you have in the file. And then importing CAD. Importing CAD is where you'll be bringing in like Rhino models or SketchUp models, even though you should not be using SketchUp. Rhino models, three-dimensional AutoCAD files, etc. If you click that, just to show you, these are all the different types of files that you can insert. So I know it says import CAD, but it's not just AutoCAD. It's any three-dimensional file or two-dimensional file that you have. Okay, and then PDF and images. So PDF, I believe, is new to Autodesk 2020, Revit 2020. But manage images should be there. You can insert them and then manage them and manage what images you have in the project. Annotate is where all of your two-dimensional tools, or the majority of your two-dimensional tools, are going to be located. So these are all of your dimension tools. These are very helpful in both conveying a dimension of a certain element, obviously, but also setting up your file, updating and changing or aligning different elements to their specific dimension. These are really helpful. In the detail group, these are all of your two-dimensional drawing tools. So detail line is creating 2D lines. Region is creating a solid hatch region, or it has different textures that you can do. Components are actually 2D components. Actually, if we bring one up. So the first one that will come up is the CMU standard. And if we zoom in, you can see that it's actually a section cut of a concrete masonry unit. These are really helpful when developing details because they integrate a lot. Revit integrates a lot of standard construction details into their libraries. And so when developing a detail of a floor slab or a connection detail between a curtain wall and a roof slab, whatever, instead of having to utilize, manually draw like a concrete masonry unit, for example, or a piece of glass, they have these elements already integrated, and many of them are done in a way which make them way quicker and way more efficient to use when developing details. And then text, if you want to put text in the drawing, that's where you can do it. And then these are all tags, which we'll get into later, but they're integral into different properties. Keynotes you will not have to know. And then these are just a couple other things. This is where you'll find your north arrow or a bar graph symbol. Just No, analyze. We won't be doing much with this except for using insight later in the semester. Massing and site. So massing and site. This is where we'll be doing. We'll be creating the conceptual masses, and the conceptual masses are basically Revit's version of like a Rhino or SketchUp, where it's more freeform modeling. But the nice thing about conceptual masses, which is different from bringing in a Rhino mass or a SketchUp mass, is that you can actually attribute different Revit elements to that mass. So you can associate walls to the faces of the mass, or you can associate floors to the faces of the mass, or a roof, etc. And when you start to get into more complex geometries, it really helps to be able to know how to use that. So yeah, and then site, so creating a topography, trees, doing parking layouts, that is all found here. Collaborate is a little bit, you won't be using this fully the way firms do. This is where multiple people can work on a project all at once across a firm and be able to update and make changes on a project while not like interrupting somebody, or making a change on one project, making a change on the same element on a different computer, and then having conflicts. This is where you control all of that. It's called central models. This is kind of arbitrary for you guys right now, but just so you know, central model is like a central Revit model that lives by itself. And then when you create that central model, you as an individual user creates what's called a local file, a local project, which basically copies the central and puts it on your computer. And then you work on that file, that local file. And then every so often you synchronize with the central file. So you basically send all of the changes that you've made in your local file back to the central model and update the central model. And the nice thing about the way that works is you have the one central model and then all of the individual local models that each individual person is working on. But they're all still linked via the World Wide Web. So if you make a change to an element that someone else has already made a change to in their local file, it'll actually tell you you cannot change that until you and the other person synchronize, to make sure that you're not changing something that's already been changed. It's a really nice process. It's a really good process. Sometimes it's a little bit laggy, but the way that it allows a large team to work on a file all at once is really nice. We'll get into work sets too. That's kind of like layers in Rhino, but it's a little bit different. And then view. So views are all of your different drawing types. So 3D views, planes, sections, elevations, specific callouts, your different schedules or legends. If you want to create a sheet, which is like the blank drawing space for a drawing, you can do that here. And then view templates, I kind of covered it in the properties, but view templates are where you can create a specific graphic aesthetic for a drawing. So let's say I have 20 details, right? And I want them all to look pretty similar. I can create a view template for the detail, right? Do it in one detail, and then use that view template and apply them to each individual detail, and they'll all have the same aesthetic. And we'll do that later on. Oh, here's a very important tool under Windows group in the View tab. switch windows. So right now we only have one view open, but let's say I open level 1. Now, in Revit 2020 and I believe 2019, you have these tabs up here that you can go back and forth. But in Revit 2018, all you have is the switch window. And if you click the switch window, it brings up the 2 different views that we have open right now. And you can switch back and forth between. If you have a bunch of windows open and you just want to close them all and kind of restart your working process, you can close inactive, which will close all of the other views that you have open except for the one that you do have currently activated. Tab views, some people like to use that, so I'm just going to open a couple more views and then do tile views. So this brings up multiple views at one time. I personally do not like using that, but some people do. So if you're one of those people, feel free. Oh boy. Sorry about that. Alright. And then you can close that. So we come back to the north. And then user interface. So this is where you can bring up the project browser. You can bring up the properties tab. You can bring up different things, but this is really helpful in case for some reason the properties, of course my mouse is, where'd it go? So let's say that the properties disappear for some reason, right? You can use the user interface. Gosh darn it. Sorry. No, come on. Come back to me. There we go. Okay, sorry. So you can use the interface. Let's say the properties have disappeared. Just go into the user interface and check that properties tab, and it will pop back up. All right. Then we have the Manage tool. Manage tool, basically, if you want to go in, manage your links, images. This has a lot of the graphic styles. So every material, every element in this, in Revit, whether it be floors, walls, whatever, they're all made up of materials, which you can access the library here, as well as different object styles. Mostly you'll be focusing on the materials here and maybe some object styles. And if you did want to access Dynamo, which I'll get into a little bit later on why we're not going to be exploring Dynamo, but if you did want to, this is where you access it. And also your project location. So if you want to change the actual geographical location of the project, which you can do, you can manage that here. Add-ins are just any plugins. So the Rhino inside, Rhino.inside, that it lives here. And any other plugins that you want to download, they're probably going to end up here. Excuse me. Enscape will pop up here. And then the biggest tool, the biggest tab here for creation or manipulation of Revit elements are under the Modify tab. Okay, so here you can copy, paste, cut different elements. All of these are your modification tools. So aligning things, moving things, copying things, rotate, trim and extend, scale, that kind of stuff. That's all found here. And then another place that you can measure or dimension, and that's your basic stuff. So yeah, so that's a rough overview of the Revit browser and how to move around within the Revit environment. Oh, I should probably go over. So up on the tippy top are a couple different tools. So your file, sorry, I'm gonna go back. And it will ask you to save every once in a while. File, obviously open and saving, exporting, printing. You can also do a couple options which we may get into later. And then home, which I believe is only on 2020, maybe on 2019, but that just accesses this front page again. And if you want to go back, it's just the back button right there. Open, save, pretty easy. Undo and redo, which are Control Z and Control Shift Z. I typically use this. The nice thing about Revit is it gives you a drop down, so you can actually go in and select where you want to undo to if you have gone through a bunch of steps and you know exactly where you want to go back to. And then your measure tool, align tool, and then this is your default 3D view, which I use a lot. If you click that, it'll go to your typical 3D view, which you can then use to pan around. To pan in the three-dimensional space, what you have to do is hold Shift and then use the right-click button, right-click and hold, and then you can pan around like so. And then to pan two-dimensionally, just back and forth, all you have to do is hit click and hold the mouse scroll button. Go there, and then up at the right-hand corner is an orthogonal box which you can use to align to different orientations. So your front orientation, you can use these arrows to go back, top, right, left, etc. And then it also has your cardinal orientation, so north, south, east, and west, which we can set at a later day. I'll show you how to set like true north. And so if true north is skewed from your project north orientation, it'll be reflected up here. So if your north is actually 30 degrees off center, it'll show that. Let me see. I think that's it. So that'll be all for this specific tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll get into actually building a Revit model with elements, start modeling, start using the different tools within Revit to create a little contemporary house. All right. Thanks, guys.